Dorothy, hello.
Hello.
If you're new to us, we are here doing a podcast on the Grants Past Remembrance Project. And Grants Past Remembrance is a truth and reconciliation project on our history as a sundown town here in Grants Pass. And this podcast is an opportunity to get to hear from our neighbors, to get to be in process together, to get to learn from each other and learn together. And I get to be here today with Dorothy, who, it just thrills me to be here with you, Dorothy, because we've gotten to do this for the past, year and a half. I haven't tracked it lately, actually, but we've been on the coalition together for Grants Past Remembrance. And so we've been in process together and learning together, and some of what we'll be getting to talk about today, we'll get to kind of share some of our process together. But first, tell us, where can we find you around town?
All right. I am a semi-retired, now part-time science teacher at RCC, so you'll find me on campus a couple of days a week. I am a big fan of the public transportation system, so you'll see me at bus stops or riding on the number 10 bus between campus and downtown. I am just kind of out and about. I do some work at the fairgrounds, so you'll see me at the fairgrounds sometimes. I help maintain some of the demonstration garden beds there. Gardening is something I've gotten into in retirement, so it's kind of a new passion for me. And I'm on a city task force, and so you'll find me around City Hall sometimes. I also want to mention, this isn't a part of my life right now, but when my dad was alive, I spent a lot of time over at Cascade Assisted Living Facility on Redwood Avenue. And so you used to be able to find me over there quite a bit. And I just, since my dad has passed, I've had more time to go out and do more things. So you'll find me around town doing whatever captures my interest. But those are some of the places you'll see me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, how lovely. It's fun to think about how life in our own town ebbs and flows.
Yes.
And shifts with seasons.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, we've gotten to ask this question. It's kind of a regular question now for anybody that's on the podcast. So tell us, why does racism matter to you?
Yes, that is an interesting question. I have lived in Grants Pass for about 10 years, and I've lived in Oregon for between 25 and 30 years, but I grew up in Chicago, and I grew up in an integrated neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. And race was very much a part of my initial awareness of life. And there was a lot of vitality to my neighborhood, like cultural vitality, economic vitality, artistic and musical vitality. It was great. There was a whole diversity of people. And there were also some issues around race that were never really talked about. So there was some anxiety around race as well. And the memory I want to share right now is of joining the Girl Scouts when I was in elementary school. And we got our little Girl Scout booklets, and our Girl Scout troop was interracial, and all the pictures in our little Girl Scout pamphlets were white faces everywhere across the board. And I would like to be able to say right now to you that that horrified me, but it did not. I had a feeling of wanting that, of wanting racial homogeneity, of wanting sameness around me. I found diversity to be kind of exhausting. And I look back at that now and I find it kind of puzzling because I was interested in, growth and learning and challenge and vitality throughout my life, but there was something there about that sameness that was appealing to me. And so, I don't know, I want to make sense of that. I want to make sense of all of the different parts of me and have all of them be okay to talk about. And racism, I feel, cuts me off from parts of myself. And so I'm interested in addressing racism so that I can live a whole, good, full life.
Yes, yes. I hear you talking about the that desire for sameness, that the appealingness of sameness, and I can hear that. I can really resonate with. There can be a safety in sameness, and there doesn't always have to be an unhealth in that sameness, unless it's isolated and there's no difference. One of the things that we have wanted to kind of dive into getting to talk about together in a place where we can share it, because we've had these conversations so much, is holding tension. So it makes me think of that sameness and holding it in tension with that difference.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that, that sameness and difference, how you saw that in yourself, that you loved difference and yet you wanted sameness?
Yeah, I think that, I have a lot to say about that, actually.
Yes.
I'll try to keep it succinct.
Oh, no need.
But I want to say first that I've been in Oregon for over 25 years, so much of my life, more than half of my life, and no, almost half of my life. And there's a lot of racial homogeneity here. There's a lot of whiteness. And it's not what I thought I craved when I was a child, Like I've kind of found it and it's like, no, wait, not this. This feels kind of like there's something missing. And so that tension between wanting the kind of comfort and familiarity of sameness, which I believe invites empathy. If I feel like I am the same as you, I can kind of feel what it's like to be in your shoes a little more readily. And then holding that intention with difference, which is challenging. And I consider challenge to be a good thing. And it invites growth. So both sameness and difference are inviting good things into my life. And I have sort of the best chance of getting good, the most possible variety of good things in my life if I don't say no to sameness and I don't say no to difference. So there's kind of a sweet spot in that holding tension between two things that appear to be opposed to each other.
Yes. Let's talk for a minute about what do we mean by holding tension?
I would love to talk about that some more. And I am a science teacher, so I have a physics metaphor.
It's one of my favorites. I want to hear it all over again because I'm still soaking it in layers.
I will ask you to think about a rope or a string or, some kind of connecting small, thin fiber kind of stuff. I'll call it a rope. And if in order to hold tension in that rope, to keep it kind of taut and tight and able to do things with it, there needs to be pull from both ends. You can't pull from one end and get tension in a rope. And so and all of the interesting things that a rope can do comes when there's tension in it. And I think of if you tie it around a box, you can pull the box when there's tension in a rope. Or when you attach it between two ends tightly, you can create a path for a tightrope walker to walk across it that they couldn't do if it was loose. You have to have that tension there. And you can weave a basket with rope, but only if there is tension through all the parts of the rope that's weaving the basket. I think of guitar strings, right? You can't have music without the tension in the guitar strings. But my main point is that the tension has to be from both ends. And so when I'm talking about holding tension, and in the context of this work, I'm really thinking about holding tension in conversation. And then that notion that you have to have it from both ends becomes really important. I have kind of acquired over my life a notion that in conversation with somebody, I either need to dominate or submit.
Yes.
And this is like the opposite of holding tension.
Yeah.
If I dominate, I kind of try to shut you down so that I can feel right and, dang, that feels good. I won that argument. And if I submit, I can feel virtuous. I let her win that one. I let her win that round. I was generous that time. But if I really want to hold tension in a conversation, I need to allow you to pull, and I need to pull back in response. If I'm kind of not tugging back in that conversation, offering something of myself, then there's no opportunity to hold tension in the space between us. Yeah. And I think of the basket and the tightrope walker and the guitar string. That tension and conversation is where all the interesting stuff happens.
Yeah.
And that's where I want to be with people, in that holding tension space.
Yeah. And it's a hard space to be. It's a hard space to stay. I think of, as you're talking, one of the ways I tend to think about it is that these two things are present at the same time that would be easier if only one of them was present. It would be easier if I did this. Okay, this is just here. Or if I did this. But when these two things are present at the same time, there is a tension that's created, and we might even feel it within us. And sometimes there's tighter tension and looser tension, but there's a good that can happen with this space. Now let's talk about that a little bit more. Why is tension a good thing? And I'm catching on to some of it with that visual of those interesting things can happen. But let's just sit a little longer with why is tension good?
I think tension in conversation is especially good.
Yeah.
Because I like what you just said recently. It would be so much easier if this part of it wasn't there, or if the other part of it wasn't there, if we only had to deal with one thing at a time. It would be easier, but it would be less rich. And so I think tension is a good thing fundamentally because it is creative. That creativity and new ideas spark from the tension between opposites. Yeah. And so this is a goal for me, to find ways to hold tension in all aspects of my life and notice ways that I am enriched by it. When I am in a group of people and somebody is saying something that I really don't want to hear right then, I can think to myself, wow, it would be really easier if my good friend so-and-so wasn't saying that right now, and not shut that up or shut it down, but hold it at the same time as I hold in tension with it. What new thought am I going to have because I'm allowing this discomfort of this tension to simply exist and not try to control it?
Yeah. Control, that catches me. I think there are moments where we really crave control, but it's not actually the thing that we really want. It doesn't bring that creativity or that enrichment. Yeah. I think on that a bit more.
I want to say something in response to control. Yeah. That I'm thinking that there's control and there's concession, that kind of can be held in tension with each other. And I have found both of those in my work with the Grants Pass Remembrance Coalition.
Yes.
That I don't have total control over the coalition, and that's a good thing. I don't want it.
Yeah.
But I'm also continually interested in participating in it. I don't concede the work to somebody else.
Yes.
And so holding that tension between control and concession, I'm not totally in control, but I'm also hungry to make my contribution. I'm not conceding it to other people.
Yes.
That tension has been very fruitful to me
Yes.
in the context of this very work that we're talking about.
You are probably one of the best people for me in this. There are moments when I'm very tempted to say, "Oh, maybe this one doesn't belong," and I've just been so thankful for your feedback in my life of, I don't know, I see it right here. Just it being intention, holding it with another thing where it's not, control isn't the only thing that we're doing.
Right.
But it's still there. It still has its place.
Right.
Did we kind of talk about, one of the things we were going to talk about was, why is tension a good thing and why do we want to hold it? Shall we dig into why do we want to hold it?
Yes. I think we did touch on it.
Yeah.
I think there's a little more to say.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm going to say what I want to say, but I
Well,
will
you start and
hold
maybe
tension
we'll-
with that,
Yes,
right?
yes.
I think it is good to hold tension because then that creative spark is close to me. And it is not something I push away from me. Holding implies a closeness, a physical proximity,
Yeah.
and even a spiritual proximity, I would say, that is really important to that process of allowing the tension to do its good work and surprise me in ways that I'm open to being surprised in, where I can find joy and wonder and fulfillment in ways that I didn't plan.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things I like with the holding image is that this is actually what I think of. I think of my hands open, not close to me. I'm not doing this. But there's this kind of holding, this openness to, here it is. I see it. I see both of these things that want to repel each other almost, and I'm just holding it. I'm not. It's not even. I'm not always personalizing it. I'm not always taking it into myself. For me personally, this holding tension has been an internal process. First of all, before I'm able to experiment with it in relationships with other people where that tension is held between other people, just holding that tension within myself, letting these things exist within myself, they usually start with much tighter tension. It's much harder. And the tension releases to a more comfortable space where I can let it just rest there. I like the words noticing and wondering, and I feel like in this holding space, it relates back to those words for me. I can notice, I can wonder about it. I can there's a space to do that.
What would happen if I trusted these opposites not to destroy each other?
Yes.
So I think there's trust in there too.
Yes, trust. Yeah.
And I'm really glad you mentioned self and inside the self, because that's been a really big one for me. I have found that when I work on being mindful about holding tension with other people, I become aware of opportunities to hold tension within myself.
Yeah.
And that's really important, to not totally shut down or totally concede to one part of the fullness of who I am.
Yes.
And so I think that holding tension within self is a nice outgrowth of holding tension with other people. And also, the more comfortable I am with the tension in myself, the more comfortable I am with the tension with other people. So it kind of, one reinforces the other, and it becomes kind of self-regenerating.
Yeah, yeah. Now we've been talking kind of on this I don't know what that plane is, but let's bring it into daily life and what this looks like in our daily lives. And different ways that this can look. There are a lot of different ways, but tell me some that are
meaningful to me.
Some that are meaningful to you. Yes.
All right. So one of the tensions that I hold within myself is between generosity and self-care. And I have found that when I don't put them up as diametric opposites to each other, like I need to be generous whether or not that's how I'm feeling right now,
yes.
or I need to take care of myself and to heck with the rest of the world, right? When I actually allow both of those to coexist, I find that they reinforce each other more than they negate each other. So that was kind of abstract.
Yeah.
But a specific example is my church this past summer, for the first time, opened a cooling shelter for Grants Pass.
Yes.
And I would go over and work shifts in the cooling shelter when we were open. And it was definitely a case of doing for others, right? I'm going to go out and do this general thing. And maybe it's time for my shift to come when I'm in the middle of a chapter of a book, and I'd really rather stay home and finish this chapter of what I'm reading, but I'm going to, go out and be generous. And then in the process, I made some really good new friends. We brought games and puzzles that I really enjoyed playing and working on with new people. And I had all kinds of fulfilling self-care experiences once I gave up the notion that self-care has to be separate from being generous to other people. So that's one example.
Yes. Yes. And tell us, what church do you go to?
I go to the Unitarian Universalists of Grants Pass.
Yes,
on E Street, across
yes.
from Mimosas.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. There's been one that's been on my mind for quite a while that I think is possibly where, possibly my first experiment with holding tension. And it's truth and love is kind of how I verbalized it. Now, I'm a Christian, and so this is truth and love is a verse in the Bible that really challenged me because I could relate to wanting to share truth, particularly in this realm of justice, and wanting to talk about that with people. But it didn't seem to coexist well with being loving and being gentle and patient and kind. And I didn't know how these two things that I knew were good and true could live together even in me, as I envisioned how I would interact with other people, or even as I experienced myself interacting with other people. And that it felt impossible for seasons to do this thing of truth, speaking justice, speaking about these things that I really cared about, and still really seeing the other person. That was really hard for me. It felt like, well, gosh, it'd just be easier to just do truth and not love. Let's just do truth. Or, well, let's just love. But is it really love if truth isn't present? Like, how do these things, how does this happen? And I had a friend that texted me on Monday, and she'd shared an experience that she'd had about, she was in a conversation with a gentleman that she knew, and he'd shared, she shared I could share this. Thank you so much. She has a big passion around, as she calls it, the isms, racism, classism, sexism, and oh goodness, there's a lot in which she's active in, and that she's experienced discrimination around and hurtfulness around. But this gentleman made a reference to, I think, like the Scottish being the first farmers, and she said it. She felt herself tighten up, and she said, Well, they were the first colonizers to farm, and it shut the conversation down. And so they went to talk about other surface things. But she'd said, I don't want that to happen. I don't want to shut down the conversation. I don't want, like, I want to be able to talk about this stuff. How do we do this? And I feel like that's been coming up a lot. How do we have these conversations with people that we love and care about? But we're finding that it's so hard to have these conversations. And I feel like so much of it relates back to that piece of truth and love for me, my experiences of how do I, in empathy and compassion, lean forward and share something about truth. Because it's so easy to separate those off from each other, to just do one or the other. And it's, anyway, that's been really heavy on me. Yeah.
I think that's a great example. I love that example, and I appreciate you sharing that, and I appreciate your friend giving you permission to share that.
So
That's
thankful.
really kind of amazing. I think one of the things we've talked about at coalition meetings is listening longer.
Listen longer.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that I can share my truth just as readily in 5 minutes as I can right now. And let's explore what this person who I disagree with, where they're coming from. Listen for a point of commonality that I can focus on and establish before giving my different perspective on truth. I've been thinking lately about how multifaceted truth is, and this is another example that I've thought of from my personal life when I was mentally preparing myself for this conversation, is different versions of the same story, like from family history.
Yes.
I'm at a stage in my life, I'll be turning 60 this year. I'm at a stage in my life where I'm looking back and kind of reflecting on where I've come from and where I'm going in this last phase of my life. And I've been working on writing down memoir. And so I've been talking to relatives about memories. And often we don't agree on what happened. There are different versions of the same story.
Yeah.
And I have such a protective impulse toward my own memories. Like I feel like I have to defend them.
Yeah.
And I often have to come back to a conversation later to hold tension in it because my first instinct is to shut down. No, that's not true. That's not the way it happened. And then we have that, where do we go from there? We've kind of cut off that opportunity for conversation.
Yeah.
But listening longer, and I can share my version just as easily in 5 minutes as I can right now. Let's hear more about where you're coming from with this version of the story. And memory is so elusive anyway. It's, who knows what the truth is. It's the same event is a different event from different people's perspectives. Yeah. And in the context of listening longer, I want to mention your podcast with Trever, which I listened to with great pleasure. And one of the things that Trever talked about, and I hope I get this right, I'm just going to share my version of this anyway, is he talked about having curiosity about the other person. And that if I can be curious about this person, this person who is saying that the Scottish were the first farmers, where does your interest in that come from? What else is around this besides that one statement?
Yes.
If I can listen longer with curiosity, I can seek a point of connection and a point of commonality that we might not have been able to find any other way. And if I either concede totally, like I'm not going there, I'm not arguing with you, it's not worth the stress to me, I'm just not going to bring my truth to this conversation at all, we lose that opportunity to find common ground.
Yes.
And if I shut that person down, we lose the opportunity to find common ground. So Trever was talking about curiosity and that search for common ground. I think he said, if you say something I disagree with, what I've learned is that there's one thing we disagree about. Let's keep talking so we can find something we do agree about.
Yeah.
And that was deeply meaningful to me.
Yeah. I feel like these are the spaces where these conversations have come up so much in Grants Past Remembrances because we're doing a community project and we want it to be truly invitational to the entire community. And people are welcome to accept the invitation or not accept the invitation, but we've kind of, I don't want to call it a burden, but we've kind of taken on part of our caretaking. Part of our caretaking of this group is making sure that as much as possible, we are attentive to all the different elements and the people and the groups within our community and holding space for them, whether or not they're present right now in our spaces, that we're almost holding tension already. Like there's, even if we don't have real life people with us in our coalition gatherings, there is a spirit of we're wanting to hold these spaces open so that anybody could walk in to this and feel connected and feel like, oh, there is space for me, and they're ready for that. And that's been a real challenge for me. There's certain groups that have been harder to remember. Ooh, how do I hold space for that group? And I think it's okay for me to. This is the Salt Shakers, the group that makes themselves known in our community. So I'll name them because they've made themselves known in our community. The group that holds signs that are often in front of Newman Methodist, but I know there's a number of other spaces in town. They used to be at the farmers market, the growers market. That was a group that took a lot of internal holding tension with before I even had the space to maybe connect briefly and do so in a space where I was okay. And it's still hard, but I wanted to share about an experience that I had connecting with them because I feel like it kind of brings to light some of the hard parts about holding tension. They were in front of the Newman Methodist for the MLK gathering on the Monday in January. And because I'm the kind of person that I am, I wanted to get to connect. And there was a different element present because I'm pretty sure I meant to confirm that this is what they call themselves. I believe they call themselves the Pepper Shakers. A group that was standing with umbrellas covering their signs and just quiet. And I'm a Christian, and the Salt Shakers have Bible verses on their signs. And so there's already a great tension that I feel within me because this is a group that I want to say, you do not belong. Like, not only do you not belong in what I know to be Christian, but I want to say you don't belong. It would be easier for you just to not be around and to not be here at all. And so there's a tight tension that I already feel in me, and I had to engage with that tension quite a bit. That truth and love piece. This, oh wow, love them? I don't know about that. I don't know if I can tap into empathy and compassion in that space, but there's been some growth in me. So I connected with them, and I was more drawn to connect with them because there was already a tension present visually, and I got a chance to talk a bit, and there was actually more talking than usual, but I still had a hard time really being patient in listening longer. Mm-hmm. And so I was more aware of the things that I need to work on in myself in that conversation that kind of had a tension that was still kind of running through it because of the way in which that conversation was started. It's a very different kind of conversation. But there was also a desire that I had to there were these quiet people that were willingly just being silent in their presence. And I wanted to see them too. And so there was some conversation between the three of us, which was really harder than I wanted it to be. And wanting to connect with these people, just knowing that I see you. And when I left, I stood in the back of the church for a bit and cried. And I really think I cried because I think there's a number of reasons why I cried. But I think part of why I cried is because sometimes tension is just so tight that it's hard. And I used to get angry. I cry more now when I experience that tight tension that I just want to get rid of. But for me, crying has kind of helped that release of the naming of I don't know what to do with this. I don't know how to hold these two things still. But here they are anyway. And so there are moments in relationships with people that we might not know what to do with. But even if we just say, and here they are anyway, I think there's still possibility there. It would have been easier to say, forget them. Forget it. I'm not going to ever try to do, I'm giving up, whatever it be. And so I hope that as I practice this more in the moments when I can't, where listening longer isn't quite working, or I'm still too impatient to listen as long as I need to listen, or there's just no space for me in that conversation, because that's sometimes how it goes. Sometimes there's just no space for you, and for me internally within my own self to still say, I'm still gonna hold space for you. That's hard. But it's good, and there's possibility there that still fills me with hope.
Wow. That's such a good story. And if you'll indulge me, I want to go back to my rope metaphor.
Yes, please do.
So I think of having so little tension in a conversation that it's easy to swat somebody away.
Oh, yes.
And you did not go there. And then I think of having so much tension in a conversation that the rope breaks. And you don't want to go there either.
Yeah.
That the magic of holding tension is really in that sweet spot between an easy swat away and breaking of the rope, of that possibility between two people.
Yeah.
I am, and you don't have to solve everything in one conversation. So my question for you after a hard conversation would be, did you get something from that? Did you learn from it? Are you ready to engage more productively the next time you go into a conversation like that? Because if any of those answers are yes, that was a great conversation.
Yes.
Especially when it's in difficult territory.
Yeah. Yeah. I know I wouldn't change. I wouldn't not have had that conversation.
Yep.
It's probably still hard for me to say that it was a great conversation, but I'm so glad I got to be in that space. And I certainly learned that it's still really hard for me to be patient and listen longer. And it's hard and it's hurtful when there's no space. And I continue to be curious. I do feel like my eyes get more tuned each time to how I could be creative about creating spaces where listening could happen. So it's never all for naught. But it's interesting to think about, though. I can never approach. Well, tell me what you think. I want to say I can never approach a conversation assuming that the other person is going to be responsible for holding their tension in an appropriate manner. But what I can be responsible to is noticing how they're holding their side and applying a reasonable amount of tension on my side, which means there are some conversations where I listen much longer, and there are some conversations where I listen longer, but I can share much more readily, or I can share much more. And then there are other conversations where, I think this I had a conversation a while ago where I shared I do racial reconciliation work in town, and I got a lot of feedback from, and I realized, she'd asked me what I do, and so I learned in that moment, this isn't a moment for me to share anything else, and that was that conversation that day was a lot from her and just a little bit from me. But my hope is that the next time we connect, it might be a little, that what that tension looks like might be a little bit different.
So good. I more ideas are popping into my head. So I love the idea of holding tension between listening and being heard. And it sounds like you were able to do a good job of that in that conversation. And it doesn't have to be 50-50 in every conversation. You need to hold that tension between sometimes I'm going to be sharing more and sometimes I'm going to be listening more, and I'm okay with that. That's part of the tension that I can learn to hold. I had so many thoughts in response to what you were saying. I'm afraid I lost some of them, but I was thinking about going back to physics again. Forgive me, but
I love it.
But Newton's third law, which is the law of action and reaction, right? Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And as one physics teacher I knew used to say it, you can't touch without being touched. And just this notion of give and take. I tug a little and I see how much tug I'm getting back in return. If I tug too hard with a little bit of tug, then we're not going to establish a productive tension. And if I tug too little with a whole lot of tug, I'm not going to establish productive tension. So what you were talking about, gauging the conversation and adjusting your response to the way the person is responding to you, to me, that's all about holding tension in conversation. It's a very dynamic thing.
Yes.
And there was one word you used that it got me thinking a little bit. You were talking about whether they were going to, whether the other party in the conversation was going to hold their attention appropriately. And I'm thinking, well, what's appropriate, right? And so there's a tension between my sense of what's appropriate in a conversation and the other person's sense of what they need to do in that conversation. And so I just think that openness to however that conversation is going to evolve and trusting that I'm going to get what I need from it and learn from it and come back next time ready to do some more, and that I'm going to hold it long after the conversation too. I'm really going to work with each of these conversations that I have and try to allow it to transform me.
Yeah.
And I hope the other person does the same, but I don't have any control over that.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to like sit in that for a minute longer because it's so it's such a hard thing, and in some ways it's also very simple. And I'm just so struck by that, the moments when we find the things that are very simple and yet very difficult, and yet deeply good, and that like that's something to push into and lean into. Yeah.
Yes. Well, one of the things I'm excited to talk to you about today that we sort of talked about in advance is how this is simple, right? And part of what's hard about it is that it's so simple. It's almost disappointingly simple. That's all it is? Well, I already knew that.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And we do. We already know how to do this.
Yeah.
We've known our whole lives how to do this. We just need to be mindful about doing it consistently on the topic of racial reconciliation, which is a hard topic for many people because of how our society is and our history, right? Our history here in Grants Pass as a sundown town, our history as a nation, as a chattel slavery nation, that there's a lot of painful history. And I want to mention, before we finish up, one of the phrases that has really caught me from working with you, Gabby, with Grants Pass Remembrance Coalition, is the broken and the beautiful. And holding tension between the broken and the beautiful is a really important part of this work. I might be talking with somebody that I see as broken in some way, cut off from my view of a good life, that I really wish they could have, but then kind of who am I to decide that for them? But even in a conversation with somebody that I might see as being broken or cut off, there's something beautiful that can happen between us.
Yes.
Beautiful things can be deeply damaging, and broken things can be the source of great beauty. And so kind of holding that possibility open that no matter what my conceptions of you are in advance, right? I think you're an idiot, or I think you're a bigot, or I think you're closed-minded, or, I think you're too much of X or Y or Z. That brokenness can be in a productive tension with the beauty that is in every person. And if I look for that in every conversation, I don't know what I'm going to find, but I'm excited to find out.
Yes. Yes. I don't know what I'm going to find, but I'm excited to find out. I feel like there's such a, my mind keeps going to this learning together, like this beauty of learning together and learning from each other, that there are, so another thing we talk about on the coalition is if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so this piece of we each play some role, and there's so much we can learn from each other if we slow down long enough to do it together, to learn from each other, to listen longer, to be curious and ask questions, to find that thing that we might agree on, and to remember that, oh yeah, we do this all the time. I think that piece, when I was sharing with my friend, she was asking me for some ideas, but the first thing I said was, I love to think about that because I can so relate to your experience. And it was, you've really kind of brought this up, that we already know how to do this. And I was able to say that to her. I know you, and you already know how to do this. You have such compassion and empathy in so many areas of your life with people that are very different, that disagree with you on all these different areas. Like, you already do this thing. But it is interesting how racial reconciliation, or talking about racism in general, seems to be kind of a common piece that we've almost like, I have curiosities around why that might be. We have kind of histories of not talking about racism, so we don't have a lot of practice in these areas. But racism does seem to be one of those areas that we forget that, like, oh, I have that body part, and I know how to use body parts, and I know how to do this movement, and I know how to be compassionate, empathetic, and listen to other people's thoughts, and I know how to be curious, and oh yeah, I know all those things, and applying it to that. Or politics, we're in a season of identifying with a particular party is just really, that's so much of how our culture operates right now. And whether or not you identify strongly with a party, it's almost easier to say that there is a party you definitely don't identify with. But that party that you definitely don't identify with, that's another piece where we can forget, oh, wait, I know how to connect with people. I know how to listen, and I know how to be patient. I do this in my family. I work on these skills with my, we do this all the time, and we forget that, oh, those same things I could just do with that group of people, or with that group of people, or on this topic of life, or on this bit of our community life together. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I really think that holding tension is a key to so much of this, because we grow up with polarities, right?
Yes.
Red and blue.
Yes.
Or racist or not racist.
Yeah.
Like, you're either one or the other.
Yes.
And so people are anxious talking about racism because I'm about to get either the saint label or the really bad guy label. And I found one of the most productive holding tensions for me internally is between good guy and bad guy.
Yes.
Like, I am both part of the problem
Yes.
and part of the solution. I can hold that tension within myself. I can be curious inside my own self about what parts of me contribute to the very problems that I'm trying to solve.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Are there any other thoughts that are rising to the surface? It can not be in a flow. That's okay.
I don't know. I just am so open to what I'm going to learn about myself by practicing holding tension, which I am not perfect at.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's another productive tension is between perfection and imperfection.
Yes.
I want to go out in the world and do everything perfectly. But I find that I'm more productive in the world when I don't try to do things perfectly. And so
Yes.
so what's that about? But I'm curious about it. And so I think that curiosity and openness and giving up the polarity of control versus total capitulation is how I want to move forward in my own life, and I hope it's helpful to other people too, but it's definitely how I want to move forward in my own life.
Yes. Yes. I look forward to continuing in process with you, because I am in that same process of that growth. And for those listening in, be curious about yourself. I'm really noticing those words, curiosity and openness, and have that curiosity about yourself and that curiosity in your relationships and about the people that are around you that you might always see, that you've had conversations with before that are hard to have, that you feel that tension, and maybe it's broken, and maybe you want to just push it aside, but be open. You never know what will come. And if you want company in it, come find us. We'll be company for you in that process.
Gladly.
Yes. Dorothy, thank you so much.
Thank you, Gabby. It was a real pleasure to talk to you today. And yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Me too.